All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us here for our first outing in the 2024 Unlock Health webinar series. I'm going to wedge in a bit of housekeeping up front here while stragglers are rolling in. First of all, if you have to drop off early, really for any reason, we are sending the link to the recorded webinar out to all registrants tomorrow or Friday at the latest, almost for sure tomorrow. Now, in that follow-up email, we'll also include presenter contact details so you can ask questions. We'll have links to the deck. We'll have links to past webinars. We'll have links to interest forms and a bunch more. Now, we do have a dedicated Q&A time at the end of today's presentation. So please log your questions into the questions panel in the sidebar during the presentation along the way so you don't forget them for the end. And finally, if you have a webinar topic suggestion, or you are a client who is interested in potentially co-presenting a success story with us, like we did for several of our webinars last year, please go to the Unlock homepage, fill out the form in the bottom, and drop us a note. All right, next slide. So my name's Tony Huth. I'm the VP of Product and Growth Marketing here at Unlock Health, having previously founded Medicom Health. Now, for those of you who do not know, Unlock Health is a technology and services growth platform that we like to say, quote unquote, connects the dots between managed care and marketing to help healthcare organizations solve today's urgent growth needs. So how are we doing this exactly? Well, first of all, Unlock has brought together longtime health industry innovators like Eruptor, like Decode, Medicom Health, and HealthAware, and most recently, the entire SPM group, which includes SPM, GLC, Dreamscape, and CenterTech. Now, this newly combined, what I like to call super group, which quite honestly is now hundreds of people strong, which sounds insane when I say it out loud like that. But honestly, it takes that kind of firepower for Unlock's ambitious mandate, which is to take the guesswork out of growth for health systems and solve healthcare's thorniest growth challenges. And I can tell you that that is not just lip service. The commitment to that mission here is palpable on a daily basis. And I can also tell you that as a result of these mergers, there is an incredible breadth and depth of genius here that's pretty staggering. Literally expert after expert, often with a decade of experience, passion, commitment, who are now all empowered to work with each other and with access to significantly more resources than any of us had alone, including an entire technology development group. With, and this is probably the most important piece, the imperative from leadership to think outside the box and come up with solutions that actually work. And that includes evaluating the best industry partners that can help us make a difference. So a little bit more on that in a minute. Now, you might be going, all right, that sounds pretty cool, Tony, but what do you really mean by solving growth challenges? Well, that's a great question. And I would say today's presentation is a fantastic, spot-on example of this mission in action. So at the request of our clients, we took a look at this seriously complex issue around balancing privacy with performance marketing campaigns. And we rolled up our sleeves and we started taking it apart piece by piece, learning a ton in the process, which is, of course, what we intend to share with you here today. And that makes a great segue into introducing today's presenters. Next slide, please. Starting with Melissa Placzkowki, the VP of Platform Compliance and Security here at Unlock Health. Melissa is an industry veteran with over 17 years of experience in healthcare digital marketing as both a client-side marketer and an agency leader with deep understanding of changing platform technologies, data privacy, and best practices. Next, we have Kathleen Perry, Managing Director at Unlock Health. Prior to joining Unlock, Kathleen founded Decode, a full-service healthcare agency with a digital foundation that supported healthcare systems and providers, driving real results. Recognized among MM&M's 40 Under 40 in 2021, Kathleen is passionate about helping healthcare with all types of marketing challenges. And finally, Nirmal Vemanna is the Senior Product Manager at Tealium. Nirmal leads Tealium's pharma product line, which includes managing strategic partnerships with healthcare tech vendors and agencies. And when he's not conducting customer interviews or otherwise helping to define new integrations and features, Nirmal is passionate about supporting customers and often lends his subject matter expertise to product launches. All right, next slide. Now, before I turn it over to Nirmal to talk a bit more about Tealium, I do want to reiterate that our mandate, our mission to solve these thorny growth challenges does not always mean that we have to develop the solution from scratch. As it turned out in this case, the best technology already existed, which is why we are excited to showcase this ongoing partnership with Tealium and talk about the great successes that we've had in delivering their best-in-class platform, plus layering on our own extra attention to the specialized concerns of health system clients that Unlock knows so well. We've had great success in doing that, and we're excited to talk about it here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nirmal.
Thank you, Tony. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. All right. So happy to talk about Tealium. Here I am representing Tealium. So Tealium was founded in 2008. We like to say that our mission is to connect our customers' data so that they can connect with their customers. We are very much a pioneer in the CDP space. CDP, for those of you not familiar with the term, stands for Customer Data Platform. You can think of our Tealium CDP as a rules-based data orchestration engine for customer data. And we want you to know that we're the first ever CDP built for HIPAA compliance. We received our HIPAA attestation back in 2015. We've built a healthcare-specific data framework that works with our CDP. This framework allows you to collect, manage, and transmit PAI, PHI, and other sensitive data in a compliant manner. It gives you the ability to control the flow of sensitive data end to end. So when you combine the framework with our CDP, not only can you manage PHI in a compliant manner, you can also engage patients in a way that makes them feel special. They are getting personalized experiences, and we're doing so in a manner that's respectful of their privacy. We'll get into all of this later in the session. Can't wait.
Thanks, Nirmal. So just the standard disclaimer here, today's talk is not intended to be legal advice or guidance, so do please, make sure you consult with your own legal counsel. But that said, we do hope the insight we provide today is helpful for you on your data and privacy journey, and as you're thinking about some of these challenges that we're facing today in the industry. So we're going to do a very quick poll before we get started. And really just wanted to kind of take a temperature check with the group here and understand, what is your main data strategy focus or concern at this time? So we'll give everyone just a minute here to just put their input in. Okay, we'll just give another few seconds more. Looks like we got everyone almost done here. And looks like we're still going. Just another few seconds. Okay. So no surprise, and can everyone see the results here? I want to just make sure. Okay, so no surprise, and Kathleen, you and I have seen a lot of this in our conversations that we've had. Google Analytics remediation is really one of the top priorities. A lot of folks are focusing on that right now, pretty much neck and neck with pixel tracking and cookie deprecation. Those are both two really important things. Seeing a lot of that as well. Kind of behind that, we have other data source remediation. No surprise there, it's a little bit less, given a lot of focus right now is getting those big things taken care of first. Kathleen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would say, it's so interesting, and we obviously see this, right? The biggest conversation we're seeing now is, right, initially it was more focused around the metapixel, and that's where a lot of these, CMOs and marketing directors first started talking about data security and privacy as it pertains to marketing and advertising efforts based on the kind of the OCR guidelines in December 22. And, it's interesting right now, we're seeing that now really shift to Google Analytics and making sure that that is HIPAA compliant. That is what we'll call like the new hot topic. But I think what's really great about what we'll be sharing today and really our philosophy is to make sure that we're helping our partners stay ahead of what's coming down next. And so it's good to see that, you know, a lot of people are all feeling the same pain, but we're also starting to look to the future about, you know, this stuff is not only going to solve our immediate need, but how is this going to help us really deal with some of the other changes as it pertains to, you know, the deprecation that we're seeing on the cookie side and the importance of growing first-party data. So it's really exciting to see this and really focus on, you know, how do we solve the here and now problem as well as tomorrow's problem.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay.
I'm just sad to see nobody's worried about patient engagement loss.
Yeah.
That's very heartbreaking. Well, that's good. I mean, that's what we hear, right? So to show that it can be done, and that's something the customer should be looking at. So yeah, awesome.
Okay, so, you know, to set the stage for the conversation today, we'll quickly talk about really what's happening on the HIPAA landscape front and some of the recent events that have occurred. Likely some of this you may have already been familiar with or maybe seen and heard, but we thought it would be helpful to just really talk about what happened even in the last quarter. We're seeing so much activity in this space right now. So in September, for example, California signed 2 reproductive privacy bills into law. These bills include significant changes to California's privacy and health information laws as it relates to those visiting or seeking care from out of state for reproductive or gender affirming care. So that one's really interesting and definitely one to watch, especially as it relates to CCPA and like how those will sort of intersect. There's a lot happening there. In October, the OCR issued 2 resources to help educate patients about telehealth and privacy and security of PHI. And that was interesting because it was really the OCR reaching out to more of like the general public and users of health systems to share guidance aimed at helping the patients understand their privacy and security risks when using telehealth services and ways that they can try to avoid those risks. So that one was interesting as well. In November, I'm sure we may all be aware of this one because it was very entertaining. The American Hospital Association sued the federal government and really led the charge with the Texas Hospital Association and 2 other systems, really pushing back on OCR and HHS guidance issued over the last year. So that will be interesting to see and kind of keep up on what's happening with that case. In December, we also saw continued momentum late in the month. The HHS released a concept paper, which was really interesting, and it outlined 4 really major components that the department is going to take through the next year to advance healthcare resiliency in the cybersecurity space. So number 1, establishing voluntary cybersecurity goals for the healthcare sector. Really, the goal of that is to streamline the confusion and some of the gray area around the numerous standards and guidelines. I think that we're all kind of feeling right now. Number 2, providing resources to incentivize and implement cybersecurity practices. So what was interesting about that, there was note in there about potentially imposing financial consequences for hospitals, which they hope will really drive short and long-term improvements. So that's going to be one to watch too. They also talked about implementing a department-wide strategy to support greater enforcement and accountability, and also stating that there likely will be an update to the HIPAA security rule in the spring of 2024. So we are keeping our eyes on this and all the things happening in this space because there's just a lot going on. Lastly, the concept paper talked about expanding really the department to a mature state to provide a one-stop shop for healthcare cybersecurity. So again, there's been so much happening. It's fascinating to kind of watch, you know, some of these things that are coming out and just really keep a pulse on what's happening. So wanted to share that in case maybe you weren't aware, haven't seen it. And at the state level, this is one of my favorite sides because it changes all the time. We really continue to see changes happening at the state privacy law level. In 2024, 5 new states will come into effect for Florida, Montana, Oregon, Texas, Washington, and 2 states, California and Colorado, which are already in effect, have additional provisions, and those states are more robust in some of their policies, but what's interesting is those will be coming into effect with their existing laws. This does not include other states that recently passed new privacy laws. Some of you may have heard about New Jersey last week, which will go into effect in 2025, or others that are moving through assembly now, which I'll touch on next. All of this to say, there will be, again, a lot to watch, not just at the federal level, but also at the state level as we head into 2024, and the space continues to be very, very active. So we've got a really nice patchwork effect going on here in the country. We have a growing list of states that have either signed new bills into law, which are already active, as I mentioned earlier, California, Connecticut. You also have Utah, Colorado, Virginia. But we've got new states going into effect this year, those ones in yellow in the right in the list. We've also got bills now in committee for some states that back in Q4 were either inactive or there really were no bills introduced at that time. So that's interesting to see. You've got Minnesota, Nebraska, Missouri, among others. So there's even more momentum that is going into this year with these state laws. So this can feel really overwhelming and totally confusing, especially if you operate in a couple of states or you have patients coming, from other states. State laws continue to jump. Their states continue to jump on board with creating their own privacy laws, as we're seeing here, and they're all kind of different flavors. So that's fun. There's unique nuances with each. And while HIPAA carve-outs do exist in most cases, this doesn't mean as marketers that we don't need to pay attention to what's going on. For example, California, which is maybe your most extreme case, has CCPA, and where you have to be mindful of is where the HIPAA governed data restrictions sort of end. That's where those state data and consumer privacy laws sort of begin. So depending on what that data is classified and then how it gets picked up into like sort of the next tier of laws, those are things to just be thinking about. Again, we're not legal counsel and every state is different, but those are things to watch and things that we are actively watching as we kind of see what's going on continuously in this space. So really good to just keep up on. And as we talk about, we mentioned earlier in the poll, Google also throws a little more gas on the fire this year. So we've also got to be thinking about first-party data. Now more than ever is that super important. So I'm sure pretty much everyone here is aware Chrome started restricting that third-party cookie by default for 1% of Chrome browsers. So again, this is where we're going to have to really have our work cut out for us this year, as this will continue to expand to, again, fuller implementation. So that first party data strategy, super important. So today we're going to focus on strategies to approach compliance through a phased approach and a longer term vision. And I wanted to share some results from a survey that we did previously in the other webinar that we did, where we asked folks where people were actually at on their particular remediation journey. In this, 62% of respondents either haven't started the journey, are in the process of evaluating partners, or really have just gone dark. So I think there's some comfort in knowing that, others are on this journey too, and you're not alone. And there's a lot of questions out there. But just thought this was, helpful to share. And there isn't really always a one-size-fits-all approach. Some folks are approaching this challenge differently. That's totally okay. Some folks have just, stripped out all tracking, analytics, and some web tools or components, like we're seeing even Google Fonts, Google Translate, or embedded YouTube videos. The pros of this is that it can be fairly quick and easy. And can ensure that you can meet certain compliance requirements, again, quickly. The cons are, though, is it puts you in the dark. And I know a lot of folks are feeling this right now in one way, shape, or form. Could be, you've been mandated to remove your analytics or your pixel tracking for your paid media. So in certain areas, you may be operating without visibility, and that's really tough. What we're also seeing as well is, some folks are looking at server-side GTM implementation, which can help remedy some of the issues, but doesn't really solve some of the perception issues for those sort of pixel chasers that might be looking at your website, trying to see what's going on there. You've also got holistic data and privacy challenges there as well, and it does require upkeep. So those are some of the challenges there. And how we think organizations should really be thinking about, how to solve for this challenge is multi-pronged. The solution really should be, number one, comprehensive and address your broader spectrum of sort of ecosystem. Have end-to-end compliance across your data supply chain, and really have an active partner or folks who can help you along the way. And lastly, but probably most importantly, is to be flexible and adaptable for future changes that come along.
Yeah,
let me go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say, I would chime in there. I think for those healthcare marketers on the call, right? You might say, like, the easiest thing for me to do is go dark because it requires the least amount of work and in terms of dealing with all the other players that are in these conversations internally at a health system. But many health systems that we work with, right, we have been struggling with, kind of the decrease in COVID, kind of the what I'll call COVID relapse and recovery in terms of having tighter budgets and dollars. And we are seeing those individuals who have, we'll say, go dark, really struggle to maintain efficiency in their marketing and advertising spend. So I think, it's so important to be thinking about this, even though it's sometimes not the most painless process as you go through this, but really thinking about what you're losing by doing some of these actions and what are the pros and cons of each. And I think another thing about this is, and I love this conversation around the end-to-end compliance across the entire data supply chain, and really focusing on your partners and having those conversations. And if you take away one thing from our webinar, I think one thing I would say is go back to all of your partners that you work with and ask, given the change in OCR guidelines in November 2022, how is your organization changing the way they work or adapting to meet the new needs? And I think it'll be really illuminating in terms of your call tracking, your CRM, your media partners, right? This is a more holistic challenge than just web analytics.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. And I think it's easy to fall into the temptation of trying to fix things piecemeal. Oh, I have an analytics problem. Let me strip that away. I have a pixel tracking problem. Let me strip that away. Mm-hmm. However, it has to be approached in a big picture sense, really. And customers are not doing it because they find the problem to be extremely overwhelming. Regulations coming down the pike, things changing rapidly. Well, to that, I would say, there are experts and partners that you can collaborate with to get a better grip on that. And so think of it holistically. Think of having a flexible compliance framework that just doesn't help you solve today's problems, but can help you future-proof against future regulation changes.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well said. So, really careful thinking is required to look at achieving compliance in the digital space that we're in today. And we're going to look at this in the lens of the sort of 4 stages here. So I'll talk about the first 2 here with awareness and consideration. And Nirmal, you're going to talk about decision and implementation. So, again, awareness is just really all about becoming aware of your tech ecosystem as it is today, understanding those gaps as much as possible, and keeping you from becoming HIPAA, or that are keeping you from becoming HIPAA compliant or putting you potentially at risk. Consideration is where you start thinking about HIPAA compliance as actually being an opportunity rather than a barrier. And wouldn't it be great if we could all get there, so that your organization can achieve great patient engagement when your HIPAA compliance is a given, and without having that fear of compliance infraction. So being able to operate in a safe way in that space as you move forward really opens up a lot of doors.
So then comes the decision, right? So now you have a better handle on what the gaps are, you have a better understanding of what you must do to become HIPAA compliant. Now comes the time to identify and select the right tech and partnerships so that can help you address these gaps in your ecosystem that you have, awareness of. Lastly, implementation. Implementation is where you collaborate with your chosen partners and try and implement a HIPAA compliant data supply chain. So how do you achieve this HIPAA compliant data supply chain? Sounds like a mouthful. So you do this by starting with a strong data foundation. So what this data foundation allows you to do, it helps you collect patient data. It helps you manage the data. It helps you distribute it for any ongoing operations you already have, like analytics, dashboards, whatever, things you had to put on hold because you're afraid of not being HIPAA compliant. So the data foundation helps you address those immediate needs while taking patient consent into account. Once the data foundation is firmly in place, then you can start thinking about implementing a CDP to engage patients in a multi-channel approach to give them that personal touch.
Thanks, Nirmal, well said. So as we sort of talked about the journey from like that high level view, we're going to focus on really that kind of last piece that Nirmal was just talking about, the implementation piece, because there's so much there and there's so many different components and how they can sort of come into play and how do we break all of that down so that we can have that HIPAA compliant data supply chain and how we can achieve that. So first and foremost, I think it's no surprise, remediation really should be top priority, which likely already is for most folks on this call. Just looking at those areas of greatest impact, rectifying those non-compliant tags, tracking pixels, Google Analytics, which is the favorite today, or any analytics that's not HIPAA compliant, certain web functionalities, and really the first priority is really to focus on these kind of components, before implementing any data strategy. And the great thing about this is it can continue to be refined. So it doesn't have to be all encompassing or perfect out of the gate, but something that you can continue to build on as you continue to develop your data framework. And the second piece of this is really that governance and that sort of really bedrock of how you operate. Putting that good governance in place is so key. And that's really done through the right technology, the right people, and the right process. So for technology, being able to future-proof and adapt your data strategy is so important. As we talked about earlier, so much is changing on the state and federal landscape. I mean, it can make your head spin. So being able to very quickly pivot at an enterprise level will be essential and a lot less stressful too. Like benefit than where we are kind of today in this landscape of, like Nirmal said, trying to remediate, let's say, analytics, and then trying to remediate a pixel over here. Doing this at an enterprise level gives you that flexibility so that you can have those controls and being able to very quickly say, oh, okay, this data component is now considered PHI. I need to be careful in how we handle that. You can have those controls very quickly to do that and adapt. So that's really crucial. On the people side, getting those right teams or partners in place who not only understand the requirements, but can also help you think about how to maximize the data you do have will be so important. You may or may not have a team internally, but if you don't, find those partners who can help you navigate that. You're not alone. As you see, a lot of other people are struggling with this too, but certainly, lean on those around you. And to be able to really put that people infrastructure in place, doing as much HIPAA training, technology training that you can internally is always beneficial. And then lastly, for process, ensuring controls are in place to support your data governance strategy in that adaptable way, in that flexible way, so you can very quickly adapt and pivot as you need to. So all of these components really is, like, again, I said, that bedrock, to the right infrastructure, having that in place as you build your framework, and that'll set you up for success in like these next two actually really exciting pieces of the journey here, which I think are pretty cool. So I'm going to turn it over to Nirmal to talk about phase 3 and 4, which are super cool.
Yep, sounds good. All right, so now comes the data foundation that you've going to be building and activating it, right? So ideally, you should have remedied any HIPAA compliance issues in your current ecosystem at this stage by the time you're ready to implement. You have also established, most likely, governance practices and procedures. Very important, the people, process, tech, the 3 pillars of governance should be well thought out. And now you can start thinking about implementing the data foundation and then activating it to do your bidding, to work for you. So what does implementing this framework mean? For one, you have to have a consent management system in place if you don't already have one. If you already have such a system in place, then you should be integrating it with the tools you've chosen to achieve HIPAA compliance in your journey. Then putting in place a first-party data strategy to prepare yourself for third-party cookie deprecation. And then it would also involve creating a standardized data layer that your entire ecosystem can rely on. And we'll talk about what this is later in the session. Refining your governance practices as needed. Now that things are starting to get connected and data might be flowing and whatnot, now is a good chance to reevaluate your governance practices and procedures and refine them. Transitioning your marketing initiatives to first-party data measurement, analytics, reporting, and other types of operations, as opposed to relying entirely on third parties. And then, when it comes to activating the HIPAA-compliant data foundation, now you start to collect patient data in real time. You're capturing patient consent. And by doing so, you're powering your entire ecosystem for analytics, for reporting, and any other business as usual operations you need to perform on a day-to-day basis. And voila, if you've done all this, you have a current ecosystem that is HIPAA compliant. Next slide, please. All right, so now that we have a HIPAA compliant data foundation, you are compliant, your operations are no longer being disrupted. What's next? Now it's time to dream. Here's the exciting part. Rather than simply being HIPAA compliant, what if we could engage each patient in a personalized fashion, right? That'd be really cool. What if we could deliver a treatment journey for each patient that takes into account their preferences, their pain points, their treatment history, their medication history, any anxieties they may have, and any other concerns they may have? And what if you could do all of this in a way that respects the patient's privacy and puts it at the heart of your engagement efforts? This is where CDP or customer data platforms come in. So using a CDP means you can take real-time consented patient data, which you already have access to now, by the way, because you have a HIPAA-compliant data foundation. So you're already securely collecting patient data, and you're able to tap into that data. So by using the CDP and connecting it to the data foundation, you can access and define attributes that are critical to patient engagement. You can start creating patient profiles using these attributes collected. You can define suitable patient audiences or segments to engage different types of patients appropriately. Whenever a patient comes in contact with your ecosystem, whether it's a call center, whether it's a patient portal or something, we can reliably identify who the patients are. We can create a new patient profile if they are a brand new patient, or we can enrich their existing profile if they are a returning patient based on any new activity, any new engagement they show across your ecosystem. The CDP, by collecting all these insights, it allows you to bring to bear everything you know about the patient in engaging them. This means, there are all kinds of interesting and exciting manners to engage the patient in real time while respecting their privacy and being compliant. And we'll be talking about CDPs in much more detail later in the session.
And I would just add there, right, as a healthcare system and as an industry, right, we're seeing these disruptors enter the space from like an Amazon, from an Amazon perspective as an example there, right? And so while today's challenges were focused on data security as it pertains to analytics, our patients and our end audiences are going to be coming to expect this more personalized communication engagement. And so when Nirmal talks about this, I think really think about it from the standpoint of we're going to have to protect our territory from other individuals and disruptors that are coming into this space that are already really adept at this type of marketing personalization.
Because they're tech companies entering healthcare, and we are healthcare organizations right into tech. Great call out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, so HIPAA compliant data supply chain. So we talked about this in the past few slides. We talked about how to implement them, what it is, all of that. I think we should kind of recap things a bit. So what is the supply chain anyway, right? So let's repeat that. So think of it as having two components. One is that HIPAA compliant data foundation, and the next one is the CDP. So the data foundation, what is it? It is what allows you to become HIPAA compliant in your short-term goals, for your short-term operations. So this data foundation is made up of a consent management system that's integrated with the rest of your tech. It comprises a data layer that provides a standardized data definition that your entire ecosystem can tap into whenever patient data is needed for a particular function or operation. It also comprises real-time collection of patient data. And it also involves first-party data that you are collecting yourself from the patient rather than from a third party, right? So you're engaging with your patients directly and in trying to understand the patient behavior. That's part of this data foundation also. And lastly, HIPAA compliant data distribution and dissemination to power your current ecosystem, right? So it's not enough if you're collecting data securely. You need to be also distributing the data in a secure fashion so bad actors can't get their hands on this data. Again, we'll cover that in detail later. The second major component is the CDP, right? Which when added to on top of the data foundation, allows you to understand your patients better, You can create and enrich patient profiles so you can engage them in a meaningful way. So together, the data foundation and the CDP complete your end-to-end HIPAA compliant data supply chain. So if you hear us talk about data supply chain, it's this end-to-end HIPAA compliant chain is what we're referring to. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Nirmal. So we've talked about a lot so far today, but taking a big step back and continuing that theme of building on these stepping stones really shows how organizational efficiencies will start to emerge. So from that initial framework that we've been talking about, standardizing the data, putting forth governance in place to help you with really that first and foremost, most important check the box of HIPAA compliance and data security there, to then really moving to the second piece, like expanding that data layer. Maybe it's incorporating additional data sources, such as mobile apps, CRM, data warehouses you might have, and help you to sort of continue to build on that functionality with agility. Then moving through that next piece, which is that data orchestration, audience profiles, to being able to finally scale and really achieve a mature data strategy that is fully compliant and most importantly, flexible, as I've kept saying, and changes, to the changes that our healthcare environment really requires these days. So of course this will, take time and it's iterative and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's a great North Star as you start to think about your data strategy and compliance maturity roadmap. So how do we achieve all of this? Pretty lofty goals here. So we'll talk about a technology solution that we are really proud to talk about today and share that has these answers for us. So as we know, likely everyone here, the current state for many folks, right? Data is unable to be standardized and meaningfully transformed, let alone sent to endpoints that maybe doesn't have a BAA in place, which makes our day-to-day as marketers extremely challenging. So what we're very excited about today is shining a light on our good partners and friends at Tealium, like Nirmal, who bring really the best-in-class solution to the market. Their longevity in the space, unparalleled expertise, and advanced technology make this partnership for us a no-brainer. We've been collaborating with Tealium to leverage this robust platform and have combined it with our own technology and white glove service to offer Unlock Privacy Pro as a solution to all of the challenges that we've talked about today, and more as we think about the future state and actually really doing something more exciting than just remediating privacy challenges. So Nirmal, you're gonna walk us through what this graphic is, and it's a lot to look at. But
indeed, yeah, it looks very crowded, but we'll break it down. Not to worry. So one thing to keep in mind: Tealium's capabilities are embedded within Unlock Privacy Pro, right? So the whole goal here is data standardization and compliance. So that's the goal. That's what we're trying to empower you to do. So let's look at the diagram from left to right slowly. So on the extreme left, what we have going on is data collection. This is where you're collecting patient data from your entire ecosystem. The systems could be CRM, could be patient portals, could be your websites that patients are interacting with, could be an MDM solution, could be any number of systems you currently have. Your consent management system also becomes yet another source to collect patient data from, right? So all this data is now being collected, it's being brought in. In the middle, all the blue blocks, that's where the collected data is being brought into Tealium's event data framework. And this is the HIPAA compliant healthcare specific framework that we've created. Lots of important things happening at this stage. So since we're collecting patient data, right, there has to be the ability to flag any potentially sensitive data. And that's what we're showing in the protected data capture box. So the ability to flag things is important because you want awareness of which data elements are sensitive. So that's why flagging is very necessary. The middle box represents the platform's data obfuscation and encryption capabilities. Encryption is important because you need to be able to protect patient data in transit when you're sending it to vendors, whether it's an email server or something else. We want the data to be secure. So encryption is very important, and that's happening in this box. In some cases, you may want to entirely obfuscate or even remove certain data elements because you don't trust the vendors. Maybe they're not BAA signing vendors. So again, this is also happening at this stage. And then we have, on the right, we have secure vendor mapping happening. This is important because not every vendor can or should receive or grab sensitive data without your knowledge. You have to be able to control what vendor gets what data. Only data you approve should be shared. So you can achieve this using our vendor mapping capability, which we'll dig into some more. Also shown in the blue section are two foundational components. One is what we call the standardized data layer. The reason for this existing is you don't want vendors working off of different definitions of the same data element. If this happens, that would reduce the quality of the insights you're deriving by working with these vendors. So the standardized data layer addresses this by making sure that the data is consistent across your entire ecosystem. And the other foundational component, again, since we're talking sensitive patient data, is user governance and permissions. This is critical because you don't want just anybody accessing the PHI within the platform. Even though the platform itself is secure, not everybody within an organization accessing the platform may be trained to handle PHI. So we have access control mechanisms to control that. Once we leave the blue mass in the middle, on the extreme right, we have integrations and delivery. So this is where all of this data you're starting to send to vendors. You can use the platform's built-in API and server-side tag integrations to send the data to your vendors of choice. If you look carefully, not every vendor receives PHI. Because of the secure vendor mapping you've done in the previous step, you're able to control what data goes to which vendor. Only data you approve and okay will be shared with a particular vendor. What this means is vendors that sign a BAA will receive PHI that you see fit to share. Again, it doesn't have to be all PHI that you collect. You decide, are they okay to receive PHI? If so, what PHI do I want to send them? So you get that control. Vendors that don't sign a BAA won't be able to access PHI with or without your knowledge. They will again only receive clean data with all kinds of PAI, PHI, and other sensitive data elements completely removed. And in the next couple of slides, we'll kind of take a closer look at some of these capabilities and do a bit of a double click. Yeah, so let's keep going.
Nirmal, before we pop to the next slide, one thing I just want to also emphasize here is the consent management component, which is so important now, especially with a lot of these different state laws or different requirements. So that consent management and being able to wrap all of this, before data even goes anywhere or is collected or transformed or anything, we're able to really put in that control so that a user coming to the site or whatever data source it is able to, opt out or, opt out of cookie tracking, things like that, which are really, really important now. And I wanted to point that out because I think that's a key piece.
No, that's very important. I think it's a guardrail, really, again, sort of an invisible hand. It's very important to keep in mind. If they don't want to be tracked, if they don't want their information used a certain way, that's something we must honor. So it is acting as the guardrail. And that's why tight integration with consent data and having it be a central data source is very critical. Yeah, thanks for that call, Melissa.
Yeah.
Yeah, next slide. Let's keep going. So let's take a closer look at some of those capabilities in the blue boxes we saw. So, and other ways in which we are helping empower the Unlock solution. So Tealium together with Unlock will sign a BAA. So you get the peace of mind and the assurance you need in us handling your patient data. So protected data capture and consent management. So we talked about flagging in the previous slide. So you can flag any potentially sensitive data element, patient data element, as restricted. The reason is that way you get better control and visibility over this data as it travels downstream, right? You want to know what data you're working with and avoid any pitfalls. So that flagging is very important. That's something the platform supports. Tealium has a feature, a third-party script blocking feature, and this can be automated. You can use this to prevent unwanted vendors from snooping around your hospital website, your organization website. So it prevents them from loading their pixels if they load any at all in the client device. It prevents it from happening by default. You have to whitelist and approve any pixels that run on your websites, which means if there is a non-BAA signing vendor, they won't be able to siphon off data behind your back, even if they not doing it with malicious intent. From a compliance standpoint, that's a major hindrance. You don't want to do that. So this script blocking feature prevents even inadvertent data snooping on the client device. Tealium provides its own consent manager. but you don't have to use it. You can integrate with your own consent manager if you have one already established, and that's important. And we talked about obfuscation, removal, and restriction. So yeah, you can do that. Whether it's PII, PHI, or some other sensitive data, you can restrict this data, obfuscate, and so on. What this means is you can clean up URLs, for example, to remove medically sensitive elements like search terms that the patient put in, HCP specialty that they're browsing, etc. This is important. The reason being, if you recall the OCR guidelines, IP addresses, when combined with URLs containing medically sensitive information, is considered PHI. So we have to treat this with care. So the ability to obfuscate or hide those sensitive elements from URLs then makes the data clean. And we talked about secure vendor mapping, data mapping. So Tealium has over 1,300 integrations available within our marketplace. Whatever vendor you're working with, analytics, reporting, something else, odds are we already have an integration with them. So rather than the vendors capturing data from the client side and you risking compliance issues, we now are able to send data to these vendors on the server side. The benefit of doing this is you get the mapping advantage, which means you control what data goes out to vendor, and depending on their your trust with them and their BAA habits, you can restrict the data that goes to a particular vendor. So no more backdoors to the patient data in any shape or form. There was a lot. If you think it's a lot to absorb, no need to worry. Unlock is here to help you with all of this, with navigating this complex landscape, and we're here to advise you as well. Next slide, please. We talked about user governance and access control, and that's something Tealium does very well as well. There is a lot of flexibility and fine-grained control when it comes to user permissions and roles within the platform. This way, you can rest assured that only Unlock personnel that are certified in training, certified and trained in handling PHI are able to access the data. You don't have to worry about the data falling into the wrong hands in that regard. And for any attributes you're capturing within Tealium, you can create custom dashboards and reports within Tealium if you're looking for quick insights on these attributes. And this can supplement any existing reporting or analytic solutions you have in place within your organization. And Melissa mentioned earlier that we have deep experience in the space. Tealium does, in fact. We've been building customer data management solutions since 2008, since our founder. We have customers of all sizes, large and small, in all kinds of regulated industries: healthcare, pharma, finance, insurance, and so on. The list goes on. Pharma in particular, it's interesting because unlike healthcare organizations, their role within the HIPAA paradigm is a little gray. They're not by legal definition covered entities, but since they are starting to interact with patients more and more directly, they have to behave as if they are covered entities. And the solutions we've built, help them as well. And we've, in my experience, I've worked with several pharma customers in their patient targeting efforts using our platform. All of this to say, we have a lot of experience working in heavily regulated industries. Whatever data challenge you can think of or come across, good chance we have helped our other customers with it, good chance we've seen it. And our customers are all over the world. We are GDPR and CCPA ready. So we offer tools that help companies become compliant if they're not already, and then stay compliant if they already are compliant. Next slide, please. All right, CDP. So we talked about CDP quite a bit earlier. Now let's finally take a look. So you can see how Tealium CDP works from left to right, so in the diagram. The CDP allows you to collect data in real time. It then allows you to analyze the collected data and then make decisions in real time on how to engage the patient. Finally, you are making decisions, based on the patient data, and then you're engaging them based on the decisions you made. Let's start with data collection. So we mentioned earlier, patient data can be consent data. It could be even anonymized prescription data you may want to use to understand trends. It could be web data from the patient's interaction with your websites. It could be patient portal data, medical history, yada, yada, yada. Since you already have the data foundation, the HIPAA compliant data foundation that we talked about earlier, a lot of these data sources may already be in place and you may already be collecting data from them. The CDP can leverage the data layer you already have created as part of your HIPAA remediation efforts. The data collected can then be used to create patient profiles. So what's in this patient profile? It could contain patient demographics, topics, and content that the patients browsed on your website, any appointments they made or they tried to make, their medical history, and any other data points. Everything can go into the creation of a patient's profile. Once they have these patient profiles, you can now create patient audiences, our segments, using these data elements. For example, clinical trial participants can be in one audience. Patients with a very high treatment adherence can be in another segment, and so on. As the patient goes through their treatment journey, we can add them to new audiences and segments and remove them from existing audiences as they traverse the journey. Why are we adding them and removing them from audiences? The reason being, these audiences correspond to different patient touch points and channels within your ecosystem. You could be using these channels and touch points to deliver a patient experience that's personalized to them. And if you are already doing it, if you're not already doing it, you should be thinking of doing it. And we're trying to show you how. We're trying to show you the art of the possible. So speaking of these channels, right? So a call center could be a touch point. An email server sending newsletters to a patient could be a touch point. We are simply activating the data from the CDP on these touch points. So all of these touch points have the latest single view of the patient, so the patients can be served effectively and efficiently. Let's take an example maybe. Let's say you have a patient who's been in treatment for maybe a few months. Every time they call the hospital's number, they have to be routed to the right department. And when they get to the right department, they may be asked to verify their identity again through a series of questions. Instead of the patient having to do this every time, what if we can make the phone number and the name of the physician treating the patient available to the call center? Based on the incoming phone number, the patient can be easily identified and given immediate assistance. The thing is, this wasn't possible before CDPs because the patient's medical history and the treatment information was in one system, where the call center database was sitting in a different system, a different data silo, if you will. By having a CDP in place, all these data silos and barriers are broken. So a sort of multi-channel seamless engagement of the patient is made possible. So when the patient moves from one channel to another, it feels like one connected journey rather than them having to repeat who they are, what their pain points are with every touch point they interact with. And this is a brand new concept in healthcare, as we talked about earlier. Again, healthcare organizations, the traditional ones, are not doing this because they're worried about the regulations like HIPAA, and who could blame them? But if you've built a solid data foundation, as we talked about earlier, with proper data controls and governance mechanisms, you don't have to worry about engaging the patient. You don't have to hesitate. The foundation that you've implemented is acting like an invisible hand, right? It's helping you with compliance. It's happening in the background silently, allowing you and freeing you up to actively engage the patient to try and improve their health outcomes. So that's what's possible with the CDP. Back to you, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you. So that was a lot to digest. I know a lot of good topics here today, but wanted to leave, just sort of with some key takeaways and really, first and foremost, talk about everything that we covered today and spark some ideas as you think about, going through your own journey. And some ways that, after you get past that remediation stage, you can think about, okay, what's next? Like, how can we build upon this? So, we truly believe that you can have your cake and eat it too, and not only thread that needle between data-driven marketing and privacy in this evolving landscape, but really be thinking kind of what's next along that continuum. So, we are truly passionate about this, and of course, happy to answer any questions. But some of the key takeaways we wanted to leave you with, here, just from a very high level. One, keep an eye on your state laws and changing legislation first and foremost. Work with your legal and compliance teams, on what your organization's comfort level is really with maybe any of those gray areas. We've seen a lot of interpretation. We've seen a lot of variation across the spectrum, even in the current environment. So, that's where just understanding, where does your organization lie there, as well as, the future will be continued refinement of that. It will never be set in stone, really, moving forward. Number two, building a strong data governance foundation, that bedrock really early on is important and can then be, setting the stage for other things that we talked about today, like some of the audience and CDP capabilities that down the road in the future, by setting yourself up for success for that now, those will be capabilities and things that you can explore much more easily in the future, and really helps from not just the compliance standpoint, but really creating that end-to-end sort of HIPAA compliant data supply chain. And, the future of this journey can really actually be exciting and offer some of those new capabilities that we've not really been able to explore before because of, data and privacy concerns. So we're really excited for this journey. We're excited to partner with you on this journey, and we're excited for our good partners at Tealium as well. So we'll go ahead and I think open it up for questions, unless Nirmal and Kathleen, you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say the time to act is now. With all the technology disruptors such as Amazon jumping on this, I think it can be done. Healthcare organizations can also do the same. And, with the right partnerships and tech in place, it's entirely feasible.
All right, thank you so much, Melissa, Nirmal, and Kathleen. That was fantastic. This is a very complex topic to get a handle on, and your breakdown was quite awesome. You packed so much in there, but so clearly laid out. And I see some questions have been coming in. So folks, if you've got more questions, go ahead and start adding those to the questions panel now. And by the way, if we do run out of time for your question, we'll include presenter contact details in the follow-up email so you can reach out to them personally. Again, that email, watch your inbox for that. It'll have links to the deck, to the recording, and an interest form if you want to learn more about our Unlock Privacy Pro product. Plus, we'll include a link to register for next month's Unlock Health webinar, which is titled Your New Normal for Campaign Measurement, Reliable ROI. Tune in to hear Unlock's experts talking about next level service line growth campaigns and concise downstream ROI in one ecosystem. All right, I'm going to dive right into these questions. First question, if there are new regulations next year, how can we make sure that we wouldn't need to retool again?
Yeah, that's a great question. Nirmal, you want to?
Yeah, I can take a crack and you can chime in. So I think we talked about this briefly in the session, right? So it's about picking the right partnerships and tech now. That's how you avoid future retooling. So in choosing the right framework, and think about a data strategy where you decide what patient data that you are collecting, and you get to decide, the strategy should allow you to decide who you're sharing it with, within your organization or without. And if you did these things, whether the regulations change today or tomorrow, it doesn't matter. As the definition of PHI changes, whenever that happens, you will be able to adapt to the changes, whether it's through governance or data configuration changes or vendor mapping or something else. So it can be done. So I think the key to that would be choose the right partnerships in tech today.
All right, next question here. CDP sounds a lot like a master data management system. Is that right?
Melissa, do you want to take that? I'm joking.
No.
I'm joking. Yeah, so I'm joking because we get this question all the time. So MDM, Master Data Management, what is it? It's a system that allows you to maintain golden records, right? So you're dealing with patient data. So you're maintaining golden records within the MDM. And the purpose is to support multiple functions across your organization or enterprise and business parlance. But what an MDM system doesn't do is activation of this collected golden record data across your entire ecosystem based on custom complex rules. A CDP, on the other hand, is built for data collection and orchestration. So patient data is, activated across different touch points and channels in real time based on rules that you define. Whether you're trying to support an analytics tool or a patient portal, you can do so in real time in a very flexible manner. Whether it's a CRM, patient portal, call center, some other channel, they all now have access to a single view of the patient, right? So again, the goal is to avoid redundancy in process and help the patient quicker, faster. And that's the goal of the CDP. And MDM maybe can act as a data source of a CDP, given all of the rich wealth of information it's holding, but it can never replace what a CDP is built and intended to do. I hope that helps.
All right, well, there's a few more questions that have come in, and I'll just offer on behalf of our hosts. that they can follow up with the individual submissions and get back to you with answer to those questions. It looks like it's time for us to wrap things up here. So once again, my thanks to Nirmal, Melissa, and Kathleen. Any parting words?
Just there's a lot happening, and again, that flexibility and just kind of, again, kind of understanding what's going on in the environment around you and your certain state and different things that are happening there. Building that foundation, it doesn't happen overnight. So, it can feel overwhelming with all of these components to it, but really getting that foundation right at the beginning, again, sets that framework for the future, as Nirmal mentioned, and really will help you as things continue to evolve and change, and to build on it and do some pretty cool things with it. So we hope this was helpful. We're really excited to answer any additional questions, and happy to help. So thanks for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks attendees for your time today. That's it, folks. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.